Again.
It's hard to believe we're in week 11.
I was telling my wife before I came in, locked myself in this room. I told her, I said, I told her how many weeks we had left. She said, you just started. She said, she tells me this. She said, we say this every semester, don't we?
Yes. It goes quickly.
Well, at work, I'll tell my office manager before, it's Thursday before we know it. And we go so hard that, the week's gone before you know it. And then my big calendar in the hallway, the lady that works part-time in my office, she helps me change out my calendar. And I told her the other day, I said, Sonia, we've got to get November up there. She said, Dr. Stedman, we just did October. And so, but anyway, it's going by quickly.
Yeah, October went by very quickly, I thought.
It is. It is. Well, Dr. Revis, it's 7 o'clock. Let's get started.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to week 11. As you've probably heard Dr. Stedman and I talking, it's really hard for me to believe that here we are in week 11. Maybe it's not hard for you to believe it, but it is hard for us to believe it. You guys have been doing some really good work, and you're on the downhill slide now. Not that you need to slide and slack off, but you're on the downhill slide at this point. Dr. Stedman, I had some really good work turned in on the AAPTEL Task 1. Really good work.
And I did too, Dr. Revis. I'm not going to say a whole lot about. We've talked about Task 1 a lot. I will say that just a reminder that when Dr. Revis and I send something back during the review stage, when it's the peer and instructor review, and you don't get 100, that's your opportunity to fix it and send it back to us as quickly as you can get it turned around, so that you can get it. You should honestly, if you turn your work in on time, that's the key. Now you got to turn it in on time. There is no reason for you not to get 100 on, on the peer and instructor review time. There's no reason for you not to get 100 on it. So, but you've got to get it back to us in time. Honestly, while it's fresh on your mind, and that's the best time to go ahead and to not. And a lot of times it's minimal things that you've got to do to get it fixed and turn around. I will remind you, don't get ahead of yourself sometime with the process of things. The peer and instructor review is important. Now, while Dr. Revis and I look at everything, you're going to see some things that we're not going to see. And sometimes it's deliberately that we don't address some things because we want you to catch it. Sometimes my eyes, and I look at so much, I'm going to miss it just because I don't see it. Because if I've looked at 15 papers, after a while, some of it starts going together. So, but that peer review process, don't take it for granted. It can really help you if you'll use it for what it's supposed to be. So you need to keep up with the process, but don't get ahead of the process.
And I've got one announcement, Dr. Stedman. If you are in my C12 class and you turn in your AAPTEL and you've not gotten feedback from me, please shoot me an email after this class. Okay?
Okay. And Dr. Revis, I did want to say something about, and I'm not going to say any more than this because you're grown. If Dr. Revis and I have not cleared your first 12 competencies, unless you have personally addressed it with Dr. Revis and me because of a personal situation, And I only know one person that we've done that with, Dr. Revis. If you have not, if they're not cleared in task stream, that means that it's not okay. We ask you to meet that deadline. And so if you haven't done that, then I would ask you to look at that and to go ahead and take care of it. One of the things that I have to remind you of is Dr. Revis and I are required to do an assessment of you and your work ethics and work habits and how you've done things at the end of this semester. That all factors into what we have to do at the end. If we're serving as your clinical coach too, then we have to do that. So it's important that you do what you're supposed to do so that it makes our job easier to do what we have to do. And we don't, because I mean, we have no choice but to take those things into consideration when we're looking at it. So we're asking you, follow the schedule, do what you're supposed to do. And just remember too, weekly attendance. We have to take weekly attendance. Weekly attendance is based on not you showing up. It's important that you show up, but it's not because you showed up tonight. It's because on Sunday night, the work that you're supposed to submit has been submitted in a timely manner, and it's what it needs to be. It doesn't have to be perfect, because if it's there for review, that means, but it needs to be as complete as you think it can be, coming to us. So just a reminder of that. And we're telling you this because you're just getting started. You've got 2 more semesters to do, and you cannot, they're not going to be like Dr. Revis and me. Some of them are not going to remind you. Our job is to help you get started well in this program, so when you get to 603 and 605, that these issues are not there. So we need you to pick up your game plan if this applies to you, and then and let's get it done. And that's it. Dr. Revis, I'm going to pull up I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to just pull up let me pull up. This is what it's going to look like this evening. And this is under week 11 in your Blackboard. We've already brought welcome comments about task 1, weekly attendance. Dr. Revis, if you would talk, well, let me just, we're going to talk about the AAPTEL Zoom session that's due this week, the case study 2 that's due next week. We're going to just quickly do a recap of task 2 of the AAPTEL, and then we're going to do an overview of task 3. I'll bring this back up in a little bit, but Dr. Revis, if you would talk about the Zoom session that is due.
Okay. All right. Well, you have an AAPTEL Zoom session that hopefully you have scheduled with your Zoom team for this week. And you remember back when we did the AAPTEL task 1 and 2, and we talked a lot about, I'm going to share my screen if you don't mind, just to remind you.
Okay, let me stop sharing then.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. There you go. Go ahead.
Remember that we gave you some conversation starters, and I'm not going to give you those conversation starters this time. These are the conversation starters that we used for the PLC, or you could use for your PLC discussion and the data analysis that you were doing in AAPTEL Task 1 and 2. Well, I'm not going to give those to you this time. As a team, you need to come up with your own dialogue starters. And remember that we are focusing on your experiences with the AAPTEL Task 1, which is a lot of your research, all of your research that you did. Talk about some things you learned in that research. I know many of you shared that in your narrative, but talk about, what did you learn when you started really researching teacher efficacy that you didn't know? And then talk about your walkthrough forms. Talk about how those were developed. Talk about your surveys. And then, of course, in task 2, you are actually gathering that walkthrough data and administering and gathering that survey data. So it's up to you and your team to come up with what you want to talk about, but we want it to be a very professional, scholarly discussion.
And
And
Dr.
we
Revis,
will,
if
yes,
I could say this while you're saying that, make sure we do emphasize task 1, but this is really the whole AAPTEL experience. After tonight, you know enough about task 2 and 3 that you can begin to talk to each other about things that you may have on your mind about task 2 and 3. So I would include that in my discussion as well as you are looking to complete those responsibilities. I'm sorry, Dr. Revis.
exactly. And of course, task 3, as you already know, because it's been previewed, is your action plan. But again, we are looking for a scholarly and professional discussion. We are looking for you to come well prepared to that discussion. We are also make sure that you are sharing in that Zoom master role. I don't want to see the same person until everybody's been Zoom master. I don't want to see the same one twice. So everybody has that opportunity to be the facilitator in that leadership role. That's what we want to see. Anything else, Dr. Stedman?
No, I just, you know what we expect, and we do expect this to be better than what you did with the AAPTEL. You should have grown and learned from that experience, and the things that we've told you. So so things should be much better this time. Based on what you've already learned and what you've already done. Let me see there. It does not want to come on. Anyway, okay, it's not
We
coming
can
up.
see your screen.
Yeah, you can. Okay, I wanted to
Yes.
show you whenever you complete this assignment. I don't know what it is. Something's not showing up there, but whenever you complete, just remember you go to the let me find it, Dr. Revis. The completed peer review Dropbox. That's where it is. Okay. If you go to the completed peer review Dropbox, look at the bottom. Zoom video. Okay, that's for the AAPTEL. I'm sorry. I apologize. The AAPTEL completed peer review Dropbox. Go to the bottom. Zoom video for task 1 of the AAPTEL or the AAPTEL experience. This is where one person, the Zoom master, is going to take care of those responsibilities, send you the link, and this is where you will put your link in for for the grade. So just a reminder of that. Any questions about what you've got to do with this assignment?
Got a couple questions in the chat box.
Okay.
One question is, if there are only 3 in our group, we will have to repeat Zoom masters for the next one. Yes. You have 4 total Zoom master opportunities. So yes, on your last one, that would be a repeat.
Right.
And then the second question is, what happens if other members aren't taking the lead and we need to get the Zoom team meeting scheduled? Well, I would say there, I would just suggest somebody in your team send out an email about when we're going to meet and then start that discussion about who's going to be the Zoom master. Now that everybody knows that it is the expectation that everybody on your team has an opportunity or is your Zoom master, then I'm hoping people will step up.
And if they don't, then Dr. Revis, you and I keep the records on our ends, and so we'll have to take care of it on our ends when we're doing our final assessments.
That's right.
But if you see that your team's not stepping up to the plate and you have to do it, then by all means, you take the leadership and do it, but give somebody the chance first. But if it doesn't happen, then do what you've got to do, and Dr. Revis and I will take care of it on our end. Okay?
And Kanisha asked, is there a specific number of talking points that need to be addressed? No, there's not a specific number.
No, and once you get into it, if you really focus on it, you know, a lot of it starts coming naturally, and the time goes by very quickly. You know, once you get started, if you're organized and you're prepared.
And one thing I would like to say, the Zoom meetings that I have watched, the ones that go the best and the smoothest are those in which the Zoom master has prepared an agenda. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't go off the agenda, but I think it helps keep everybody focused. So when you're a Zoom master, it's not just the recording, you are facilitating that meeting. You're moving it along. You're making sure everybody has an opportunity to contribute and that no one person is dominating that discussion. And I know some of you have done a lot of PLC facilitation and you're very familiar with that process,
Right.
But others of you are not. So this is your opportunity.
Okay. Okay. Are we ready to move on, Dr. Revis, you think?
I think so.
Okay. Case study 2 for the AAPTEL. Again, that will be due the next week, not this week, but the next week. But you need to go ahead and plan for it. In fact, while you're with your group this week, I would go ahead and make the plans, you know, at the end of that, you can go ahead and make plans for, you know, for whenever you're going to do this the next week and who's going to do what. That's a good opportunity to do that. And we're not coming together on Thursday night again. So I would say, I would take advantage of the fact that you're used to Thursday nights anyway, for the most part, and come together as a Zoom team on Thursday night and go ahead and get scheduled and take care of it. That's what I would do if it was me. But go to case study materials. Again, these are your directions. It's the same thing as it was with case study 1. And then this is case study 2, scenario 2. And this is all aligned with this is aligned with the AAPTEL, and it's about a community of teachers. This is very interesting. I think you're going to enjoy this. A lot of deep stuff in there. And then this is where, once you get through, this is where, remember, it's a 2-part thing: your written reflection, and then the Zoom link that you have to supply. You're going to answer questions based on reading the case study. We don't need to see that. That comes up as a part of your discussion, but we need to see your written reflection, just as you did before, and the Zoom link that is provided to you by your Zoom team captain for this assignment. And this is where you would place it. Again, we would expect you've gone through the AAPTEL experience. We've told you some things that you need to do differently. We would expect this to be a much more advanced, much more sophisticated end result with this assignment. Wouldn't you say, Dr. Revis?
Yes, and guys, we want to hear what you think, but you've got to back up what you think by some of the research you've done, some of the reading that you've done. I need to hear the language of the AAPTEL. I need to hear you talk about some of the readings. For example, Whitaker says, da, 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 or Linda Darling Hammond says this. And I agree with that, because I believe that the best professional development is over a long period of time with follow-up and with coaching. You know, don't just tell me what you think. Tell me what you think based on what you've learned, your research and your reading.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move on. This is going to be a quick review. Task 1 is pretty much, unless we're dealing with you personally, task 1 is almost history. You finish it up, clean it up, get it to us. A lot of a lot of students have already turned it in. Dr. Revis had begun turning it in for a final grade. So, you know, they're moving on well with this. And like I said, I was pleased overall. I was very pleased with the results of task one. Just remember, in task one, you did all the research in those 5 areas, those 5 headings. You did all the research. That this is what the research says. You created or found the instrument that you were going to use for your walkthrough. Your survey instrument was created based on it was evidence-based. Most of you pulled it from in North Carolina from the Teacher Working Conditions Survey. I had one student that really did, Solomon, I think it may have been Solomon, I can't remember, did an excellent job. And the Elliott is just that's a very comprehensive document. But he really did a good job extracting his walkthrough instrument from there and his questionnaire from there. I was very, very pleased with how well he did that. And several have followed some of the same routes with that. A lot of good work was done with that. But you've created them in task one. Now let's go to reminder what you're doing this week, and some have already started on this. The same 5 questions are going to show up again, or the same 5 headings are going to show up again. And as we discussed last week and the week before, you're going to now look at from task one, this is what the research says. But you know what? In doing my walkthroughs, some of it is just simply because you're a teacher there, and you walk up and down the halls, and you just simply know the culture of your school. You know what's going on. This is what my principal said. This is what in the interview, you may have done a small focus group interview with a group of your peers. You can even reflect back on some of your in your PLCs, you know, things that have said. This is where you're gathering qualitative data is what you're gathering now. So what you're looking at now, based on what you know, what you see, what has happened as a result of the walkthroughs that you are making, the questions that you ask administration or co-workers, your peers, or questions you may ask the literacy coach or those people that serve in leadership capacities other than the principal and the assistant principal, any of those people. Now the research said this, but now when it comes to building efficacy and empowering among staff, this is actually what is happening at my school, based on what I see and what I know and what I have found out. Now you've got to talk about it now. You're going to talk about it. And again, Dr. Revis talked to you about this last week. You're looking for the gap. You're looking for the difference. When you here's the research, here's what I've done, and what has happened in between the gap. There's a gap right there. There's a gap. Based on what research says, based on what's happening, there's a gap. And that's what Dr. Revis is going to talk about in a few minutes. When you get to task 3, you want to close the gap. That's what task 3 is going to be about. But right here, again, it's not what you think, it's what you know, what is actually happening at your school. And what you need to remember is the research that you've done in task 1, you don't have to go back and regurgitate all that research over again. However, when you get to building efficacy and empowerment among staff, the language should be there. You need to say that, you know, based on what research says, blah, 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 blah. And you're talking about building the efficacy and empowerment among staff, based on what research says, but based on what is happening at my school. And then you go on and you tell the story. And it's okay if it's not the best in the world. It's okay, tell the truth. You can't fix it if you don't bring it out, if you don't expose it, okay? And you're going to do the same thing with all 5 of those headings all over again. Again, it's not your opinion. It's what is really happening compared to what research says. That's what you're talking about here, okay?
And Dr. Stedman, can I just butt in a little bit?
Sure, yes.
Before you start doing your analysis between research and what really is, I want to see a lead-in paragraph. Again, I'd like to hear you say that you administered through your survey and you had a such and thus response rate. You were able to observe 5 different English language arts classrooms, and you gathered data in order to start this analysis. So just take a paragraph and talk a little bit about your survey administration and your walkthroughs.
Right.
And then roll your sleeves up and get into the comparison between what the research says where we want to be and where we really are. And you're going to find areas where you may be right in line with the research.
Just say that.
Excuse me?
I told him to just, and if that's the case, just to say that.
Yeah, just say that. But you should, I'm not known a school yet that didn't have some areas along these 5 different correlates in which you don't have some areas for growth and improvement. Remember, it was just like the AAPTEL. You've got to find some gaps, even if they're not huge gaps. Find places where you can grow and improve.
There's always room for growth. Always. So again, in task 1, you've researched the best practices for teacher empowerment and leadership in the school. And in task 2, you're going to take these same 5 areas. You're going to analyze the gaps between what the research says from task 1 and what was actually observed in each of these areas in the school for task 2. Gaps in these 5 areas are to be addressed in narrative form using APA format and referencing sources identified in the literature as applicable. Now, Dr. Revis, would you like to pick up with their work for prompt 2?
Okay, so prompt 2 is where you you exhibit and you display your walkthrough data and your survey data. And so for the walkthrough data, you're summarizing that data in some type of graphical representation. And you're going to talk about it again. What are the results of your survey? Where are areas that you feel like you needed to grow according to your particular walkthrough form? It may be, if you used Marzano's high yield, it may be that you saw a weakness in the 5 classrooms that only 2 out of the 5 teachers use non-linguistic representations, okay? For your survey data, you summarize that survey data in some type of table, and then you talk a little bit about that. Again, be sure that in prompt 2, that when you are giving these tables or figures, that you use correct APA formatting.
Dr. Revis, Trico, you're with us? I think I saw you sign in. Trico, unmute yourself. Trico has already completed task 2 and has done an excellent job. Trico, talk about your experience with that.
I just took the 5, the efficacy and everything, the 5 things. And once I got cleared with task 1, I got permission before from my chief academic officer to go ahead and start the walkthroughs. She went with me on 2 of them to make sure I knew what to look for, to make sure that the staff realized it was not a penalty phase. I'm not there to say, oh, I got you. Once I gathered all that data, I sent an email to my staff to say, okay, I'm in school and here's a survey I would like for you to complete. It's anonymous. So they sent honest feedback. They answered the questions. And then from there, I started just typing up and compiling my charts and everything.
Talk
So it
about
was not
you did.
as difficult as task one.
Talk about your charts and just talk a little bit, because you did a great job with that, how you went about that process.
So with my charts, again, I did get permission first and foremost. So I used Google Forms to create the teacher working condition survey questions. I used Person County's non-yielding, non-negotiable high yield strategies walkthrough form. And then I used a Ratchet survey that I created with permission. And all I did was I put them in Google Forms. If you put it all in Google Forms, then you can create charts. You just go to the top, highlight the area that you want, select create chart, and it'll create the chart for you. So you have to do no work. And I just then saved it on a file and then inserted it into my document.
Okay. Okay. And again, did an excellent job. And I will tell you, think about, I told you to work smart, class, and when these walk through, I mean, when work is put for peer and instructor review, take that opportunity you need to look and see. Those of you, when Trico's works in there, you need to see what Trico's done. You've got access to that. Now, that doesn't mean that anybody will copy Trico's work or anybody else's work, but it gives you an idea. If you've got a question in your mind about this, is an opportunity, you learn from each other. So this is a golden opportunity to look and just say, how is so-and-so doing this? You don't have to always do it exactly, but at least it gives you an idea and a direction to go in. Trico, thank you for sharing that information.
Yes, thank
You're
you.
welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
And don't forget, you also have to provide some narrative with don't just throw out the tables and charts. You talk about them. And this writing is going to be a little bit different than the writing you've done before in your research writing, because you're going to be describing data and describing your findings.
Okay. Now we're going to do an overview of task 3, because some of you are already at that place and we don't want to hold anybody back. So just hang on, and we'll go over this again next week. But we just didn't want to hold anybody back. Now, just remember, now once all of this is done, you will have identified after task 2, you will have identified where the gaps are. Now, based on where the gaps are, that's what you're going to do with task 3. Once you know what the gaps are, you got to say, okay, now we got to fix it. What are we going to do to fix it? You work with this is where you will work with your PLC team. You're going to work with your PLC team. But now remember that in task 3, you've got to present to your administration. Now, I want to clear something up before Dr. Revis talks about the actual action plan or the growth plan. Your presentation must include, but is not limited to, the following. Now, somebody sent me a question this week or an email or text and said, do we have to write? You don't have to write anything here. These are suggestions right here. These are things that you need to do as a result of your presentation. You need to prepare yourself for this. Now, guess what? A report of best practices. Guess what? You've already written it. Where did you write that? Somebody, where did you write that?
And task 1.
Task 1 of the AAPTEL, right? A visual checklist. Where did you do that?
Task 1 from 2.
That's right. Now, think about what we just talked about. The gap analysis. Where will that have been done?
Task 2.
And task 2. So see, you're going to talk about all that you've already done. And then it goes into number 4. You're going to talk about that growth plan that Dr. Revis is going to talk about in just a few minutes. So all of this at a minimum should be in your presentation. And guess what? When Kalisha presents to her administration, Kalisha's going to know so much. They're going to be so impressed with her. They're going to probably give her a raise. But see, you go in there and you talk about, when you present, you're doing a full. You need to present just as if you were standing in front of the superintendent and the Board of Education. You need to prepare this. This is your opportunity for when you get through, for your principal to say, wow. It needs to be the wow effect. This is your time to shine. And I would have my team with me too, if they would allow it. I would have my PLC team with me there as support and backup. But just remember, this is your time to shine. You must do all of this in your presentation. I would have the best, and I'm going to use it as a PowerPoint presentation or Prezi, whatever you do. It would be the best that I could possibly present, the most professional looking that I could have. Now, Dr. Revis, I'm going to just let them know the narrative's down here for all the headings, and you're going to talk about all these headings, but I'm going to come out of this so that I can pull up the actual template, and I think you can, or do you want to talk about this first and then me pull up the template?
Well, just real quickly, guys, these are the same headings that you used in the AAPTEL when you talked about your action plan for student growth. This is about a growth plan for teacher leadership and empowerment, but your headings are going to be the same type of headings, okay? I think they're exactly the same. So let me zero in on the very last one, formative and summative assessment criteria. Remember that formative assessment as far as in this context of an action plan, formative assessment, you have to talk about how you're going to monitor and know that the adults are doing what they should be doing. And the only way you can do that I know of is through walkthroughs, observations, examining lesson plans, those kinds of things. So remember that piece or you'll get it sent right back.
And in this essence, summative assessment is still going to be, you're still working with adults this time. You're working with teachers. The summative assessment is still going to be with your formative is the adults you're working with. Summative is still the adults you're working with this time, because in the end, how are you going to know that what you have proposed in that growth plan, what are you going to do at the end to assess whether it's been a success or not, or whether you need to go back and revisit some areas and to, but just remember, it's for the adults. So you're going to ask, when I do my presentation, what do I do? The same thing you did with the AAPTEL. After all of this, after your action plan, and we're going to show you the template again in a minute. At the very end of that is where you would put your proof of your presentation, or it can be in your appendices. I would have a narrative at the end of that, and I would actually talk about that experience. Talk about the experience. What it a reflection on it. Maybe what the principal questions that were asked. Are they going to support it? What did they have to say? Are we going to be able to move forward with it? Just talk about that, and then make sure that if you do a PowerPoint, the slides of that presentation are there and that we can read them. Let me come out of this and then bring this up, Dr. Revis. This is the actual, that's the template. You want to talk about that, Dr. Revis?
Yes, it's the same template that you use for the AAPTEL. So you are creating that growth plan using this template, but you also have all those narrative pieces you've got to write about as well. I think we had that question in a chat box. And then we've got a question about how long should the presentation be? There's no time limit, but you've got to have those things that Dr. Stedman just talked about. You got to talk about the research. You've got to talk about your data collection, your gap analysis, and your growth plan.
Dr. Revis, realistically, I mean, you can't go through all of that in 5 or 10 minutes. You need to allow enough time that you can very professionally present. There's times for questions and responses to the questions. So, you know, make sure that the time that you ask to be allotted for this is going to be quality time, so it does not have to be rushed. Now, the presentation, possibly, you know, I don't know what the circumstances are. Now, we would love the face-to-face presentations, but based on whatever your circumstances are with your administration, it could be it could be a Zoom presentation or you know, whatever you use in your system. It could be that as well, you know, if that's what it has to be.
We
That's
still have
that's a
one more
good,
question
okay.
that we haven't answered. Well, we've talked about it. Wanted you to repeat what you said about summative criteria.
Okay, Dr. Revis, would you like to answer that then?
Sure. Remember, for formative and summative assessment for this growth plan, this is about the adult development, okay? So your formative assessment and your summative assessment are tied to adults. So let's say, for example, that let's say that one of the gaps was that a high percentage of your teachers say they don't have input in what they're doing for staff development. Well, you could do a post survey again. You could resurvey them, and you could say my summative assessment may be that we see an increase in the percentage of teachers who report that they have a say-so in professional development. Just as an example.
That's right. And then again, you know, and again, if you're in North Carolina, you know, you could use the next time that the teacher working condition survey is done, you may use the results of that as a gauge of, you know, the sections that you need to hone in on, you know, for this particular action plan. You could actually use that as a summative review too, based on whenever that time is. I mean, there's lots of things you can do. Again, talk with your PLC team, get input from them as well. They can give you ideas that maybe you can't think of.
Now, one thing that I noticed with several of you on the AAPTEL, you had your principal or admin person on your PLC team, and that's fine, but you've got to have a presentation here. So even if they are on your PLC team, that you still have to do a presentation.
This one is a big, this presentation is this is like a big exam. Let me put it that way. So we need this to really be a great presentation.
So I know that some of you, your wheels are spinning and you're already thinking, gosh, I've got to set a PLC meeting up with my PLC sometime the 1st of next week. Yes, you do. And you also need to try to go ahead and schedule your presentation with your principal toward the end of next week. So next week is going to be packed. Okay.
Well, not next week, Dr. Revis.
The following week.
The following week.
Right.
You've got some time, yeah. And
okay.
then and the good thing about it is now next week is week 12. We come face to face next week. Okay, hold on, Laura, we'll get with you. We come face to face next week, but then week 13, we're giving you that night off because you've got so much to do that week that we're giving you that time to be able to use your time. Okay, Lauren, unmute just and ask us what it is that might not be clear.
I'm just looking at the directions for task 3. So like the vision for positive school environment, documentation of support, identify needs, those are each a heading and then we write underneath them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
you're
our-
gonna remember,
we-
you're gonna do two things. You're gonna write about it, and then you're gonna actually show it. What you write about, you're gonna show it in your action plan.
Okay, so we're just
So-
kind of putting it another way below in the,
Right.
Okay, so is that where, are we doing more research here or we're just discussing the vision for positive, like documentation of support, identify needs? Like we'd be talking about there like walkthroughs or meeting with teachers and coaching them, or
Right.
are we pulling in research?
You don't really have to pull in research, but now you're looking for solution strategies. You've got to incorporate in there, what are we going to do to try to fix this problem? You've already done the research. Now, there may
Okay.
be some minor research in there because there may be some staff development that you want to, specific staff development that you want to provide to your school because you feel that there's a need for that. So your research may be that you find out more about that staff development so that when you present to the principal, you're knowledgeable of what you're talking to them about.
And we're doing each of those areas with our PLC, correct?
I would, you're going to have to do pre-work ahead of time, but you
Okay.
need to, when you go to your PLC, you can have your work done, but then share with
Okay.
them and get input from them as well.
Okay, so basically we're just putting all of everything that we're putting in that chart in a narrative form before you see the chart.
Yeah, exactly. And you remember you did that with the AAPTEL.
Yes,
You
okay,
wrote about it and then you showed us in the action plan what you wrote about it there. So
Okay.
you're doing the same thing, except this time you're doing it for the teachers.
Okay.
Not the students. Does that help?
it does. I actually think I was making it more harder than it
I
It
think
really was. I
you
usually
were.
do that.
But I'm glad you asked the question.
Okay.
Okay, Katie?
So my principal wants me to present to the school improvement team with her present. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I just want to make sure before I did it.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's great.
That's great, yes.
Okay, Racine?
I'm just clarifying the presentation for administration, because I heard earlier that the gap analysis is in task 2, but I think it's in task 3 unless I'm looking at that wrong. So if that's in task 3, is that happening the same week that you were talking about earlier with no? Okay.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're going to identify the gap analysis in task 2, but you're going to
Okay.
actually show it and provide solutions in task 3.
Okay.
Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yeah, so that gap analysis in task 2 is part of our narrative as we go through our data.
Absolutely.
Okay,
It's actually going to guide your narrative from that point on.
that makes sense. Thank
Okay.
you.
You are welcome. Okay, other questions? These are good questions. Think about it, guys. Think about 11 weeks ago when you started. Think about where you are now and your thinking process and the things that you're doing. Some of you probably never thought, I'll never. Well, you probably think now, I would have never thought about this had I not been in this program. And the things that you're involved in and that you're doing now. You've grown more than you ever can realize.
I
And
have a
it's-
question,
Hey, Tanya.
Dr. Stedman. Hi, good afternoon or good evening. How has people in the past put the video inside of their AAPTELs, because with Microsoft, I add the video, but you can't press it. So how do you all look at the video, and how have some people put the video in? Like, what is the best way to do that?
Let me tell you what the video is for more than anything else, because we don't actually, Blackboard does not like videos. I'll put it that way. Blackboard is not, but what this is good for is good for you to have this and to be able to transfer it to your competency folio, because it becomes an amazing artifact piece when you're submitting that information. You know, in your so it's for future use more than it is right now. You take an opportunity, because you can't go back and repeat that experience. As long as we see the frames from your PowerPoint presentation, and I have occasionally taken the link that has been provided and I have put it up in the top, and I've opened it up and I've looked at it, but I can't say that I always look at every one of them, because by that time I don't have time to look at all of them. But I do. It's more for you than it is for Dr. Revis and me. And you need to take that, and you need to make sure that that becomes one of your major artifacts that you put in your competency folio and task stream. And we encourage that. Okay, does that help?
Yes, it's very helpful. Thank you. And like you said, Blackboard does not like videos, so I could not upload anything the correct way. So I was just trying to see if there was something out there that that someone else is doing. So thank you for that. Thank you, Preston.
You're welcome. Okay. Okay, other questions?
Okay, we've got a question in our chat. It says the schedule says the draft of task 3 is due next week. And with Veterans Day next week, we only have 3 days. You must be getting an extra day off, right, Michelle? We only have 3 days. And if we're unable to get both our PLC and our admin meetings done, can we do the admin meeting the following week before the final draft is due?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. In fact, you may, Dr. Revis, I've thought about it. They've got enough time in there. Don't worry so much about the presentation until you have submitted submitted it to us, and we've approved it for you too. Now, if you're at a place where you can, you can, and you feel comfortable with it, and you can work it out, we're not going to stop you. But I would say that submit it for final grade, or submit it for review, and then you've got that next week that you can work on it as well, the presentation. And the presentation would actually come with your final submission for grade. Okay, does that make sense? So you've got time in there. Okay, other questions?
I have a question.
Hey, Jesse.
Hey, okay, so I was looking at the weekly assignments, and it says the peer reviews are only due in Blackboard's assignment Dropbox, but I just noticed that everyone had posted them in the discussion board again. So do I need to go back and do that, or?
Yeah, they should be. And if that was you do them just like you did the AAPTEL.
Okay,
You
well,
post them
sorry,
two places. Yeah.
sorry, I read that wrong.
That's okay. Thanks for asking that, though.
And I've already had read some really good peer reviews. Guys, again, if the person you're supposed to peer review doesn't have their work on done in time for you to do it by Tuesday evening, you choose somebody else and move on. Don't let somebody hold you up.
Okay. Okay. You're just about there.
Just about. Guys, in the next couple of weeks, you're going to have this knocked out.
let me tell you, in closing, let's make sure that you, let me pull this up so that just so that we can make sure before we close out. And let me pull that up at the bottom. Now, this is in Blackboard under week 11. Again, these are important dates to remember. Remember, task 1 of the AAPTEL is due to Blackboard for final instructor grade no later than Sunday, November the 7th by 9:00 p.m. Task 2 of the AAPTEL is due to Blackboard for peer instructor review by Sunday, November the 7th at 9:00 p.m. Same thing. You're finishing up with task 1, and we're reviewing task 2. Then task 2 of the AAPTEL peer reviews no later than next Tuesday, November the 9th, prior to our class. Your AAPTEL Zoom video is due this Sunday by November 7th by 9:00 p.m. I would go ahead and I would make plans for that tonight. When we got through, I would go ahead and have those plans worked out. And then remember, case study 2 is the next week by 9:00. We will not be coming on board Thursday evening, but I would highly encourage you to use that time, for this assignment, for the video assignment. And the same thing will be next week. I would use that time as well. Okay. Any more questions before we close out? This has been.
If I could ask if Preston is still on, Preston, would you give me a call after this is over?
Okay. Okay. He said yes, ma'am. I didn't know if you saw that or not. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Have a good rest of your week.